The sound of the door crashing open echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Officers shouting, flashlights blinding, confusion as they stormed into the wrong house. A terrified scream. A split second later, a deafening gunshot rips through the air. Another shot, then silence. Across town, Marcus Hayes, former FBI profiler, glances at his phone screen as it buzzes for the 5th time. A missed call. His daughter, Alana, calling from home. His heart skips, panic rising. He races towards his car, fingers trembling as he dials her number. No answer. The road blurs past, his mind spinning with dread. What's happening? He bursts through the front door, only to be stopped dead in his tracks. The smell of blood hits him first. His daughter, his sweet, innocent Alana, lying lifeless on the floor, her body covered in blood. She's still wearing the white dress she had picked for her birthday party. The cake, untouched, sits in the corner, splattered with red dot. Tears well up in his eyes. But it's the rage that burns hotter. The police say it was a mistaken identity, but he knows the truth. They came for her. They took her life. And now, they walk free. Marcus stares straight into the camera, his eyes cold with determination. They killed my baby. His voice cracks for a split second, but his next words are clear, filled with cold fury. Now I'm killing them back. The sun peeked through the curtains, casting a soft golden glow over the kitchen table. It was a quiet, peaceful morning, the kind of morning that felt like it could last forever. The smell of pancakes filled the air, mingling with the fresh aroma of coffee brewing. Alana Hayes, dressed in her favorite oversized sweatshirt and pajama pants, sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, a smile playing on her lips as she read through birthday wishes. 18 today, huh? Marcus teased from the stove, flipping the pancakes with a flick of his wrist. His voice was light, filled with warmth, but there was something else in his eyes. A hint of pride mixed with a touch of disbelief. 18, it had come too fast. Don't remind me. Alana laughed, pushing a lock of hair behind her ear. I'm practically ancient now. She exaggerated a dramatic sigh. And Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. You think 18 is old? Wait until you hit 30. You'll be begging for 18 back. He slid a stack of pancakes onto her plate, setting it in front of her with a wink. What's your birthday wish, kiddo? Alana smiled brightly. Her dream was always so clear, so steady. I want to be a civil rights lawyer. I want to change the world, Dad. The words flowed easily from her, as if they had been practiced 100 times, but her eyes sparkled with genuine belief. This wasn't just a passing phase, it was a calling. Marcus sat down across from her, his own plate of pancakes untouched. Change the world, huh? You sure you're not aiming too high? She raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk curling on her lips. If you're not aiming high, what's the point? He smiled, proud of the fire in her. She had the fire of someone who would fight for what was right, even if it meant going against everything, even if it meant fighting a broken system. They ate in a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty but full of understanding. The kitchen was small, but it felt like the heart of their home where they had shared every important moment of their lives. The laughter over the breakfast table, the quiet discussions over dinner about the injustices of the world, the dream that Alana carried in her heart to right those wrongs. The sound of the front door opening interrupted their morning ritual. A quick knock on the door followed by a warm, familiar voice. Hey, someone's officially a grown-up today. Marcus looked up to see Alana's mother, Claire, walking in with a box of balloons and a small, brightly wrapped gift. Her face lit up when she saw her daughter, and the two embraced in a tight hug. Happy birthday, sweet girl, Claire said, holding Alana at arm's length to admire her. 18. Can you believe it? Alana smiled, feeling the love from both of her parents, the ones who had always supported her even when life was tough. She opened the box of balloons, letting the colorful balloons float to the ceiling. The scene was so ordinary, so full of joy, and it felt as though the world was right, like nothing could ever go wrong. There was no hint of the tragedy lurking just beyond the horizon, no sign of the storm that would soon shatter everything. After breakfast, they gathered around the small dining table, a collection of presents stacked neatly in front of Alana. Her eyes shone as she unwrapped them, each gift a symbol of the love her parents had for her. A stack of books on civil rights law, a framed picture of them together, the one taken last summer on their trip to the coast, a necklace with a small pendant of Lady Justice. One day Marcus said, his voice low and serious, "You'll wear that necklace when you're standing in front of a judge, changing lives. You've got the heart for it, Alana." One day, she echoed, smiling back at him, her future sparkling as bright as her smile. That was a day filled with laughter, with shared memories and moments of joy, small celebrations that were everything and nothing all at once. But in the middle of it all, in the quiet corners of the room, there was an unspoken understanding. The way Marcus watched her, the way Claire held on to the moment a little longer than usual, they all knew it. This was the last peaceful day. The storm was coming, but for now, everything was perfect, and nothing was ever going to be the same. The evening wore on. The house filled with the sound of laughter and music. But the joy in the air was nothing compared to the terror building elsewhere. It was supposed to be a celebration Alana's 18th birthday. Her family was gathered around, the balloons still floating in the living room and the cake waiting to be sliced. But outside, far from the warmth of the home, something was about to go horribly wrong. That it was just after 10 p.m. when the call came in. Marcus, Claire, and Alana had just finished dinner. Claire had gone upstairs to rest, and Marcus was out in the garage, gathering some supplies for the party. Alana, as she had done so many times before, was setting up her decorations in the living room. It was a moment of calm. Her fingers were sticky from frosting the cake, her laughter mingling with the background music, the soft hum of the kitchen refrigerator the only sound beside her movements. She hummed along to her favorite song, looking around the room at the streamers she had hung, the birthday banner above the fireplace, and the plates of snacks on the table, all set for her friends. This is going to be perfect, she thought, glancing at her phone for the time. Outside, a black sedan pulled up, lights flickering as the sirens were cut off in an instant. It wasn't a usual police patrol car. This one was unmarked, a special unit. There was no announcement, no warning as the officers moved swiftly, weapons drawn, toward the front door. There was no knock, just a booted foot slamming into the door with violent force. The sound shattered the quiet night. Alana froze, her heart racing. She heard shouting, men's voices yelling commands her name in the mix. But she couldn't make sense of it, she thought. For a second it was some kind of mistake. She stood, terrified, phone in hand. Her mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. She tried to dial her father. The call wouldn't connect. Get down, a voice barked, her breath caught in her throat. Get down. She hadn't even seen their faces, just the black uniforms, the masks. She turned to reach for the phone again, her shaking hands trying to unlock it. But the officers didn't give her the chance. Get on the ground. Now, in that instant, one of the officers, his finger already on the trigger, saw her phone in her hand. The flashing screen, a weapon. It didn't matter that it was just a phone. His training told him one thing: threat. He didn't wait, didn't hesitate. The first shot tore through the silence. Alana's body jerked back, the force sending her crashing to the floor. The room spun as she fell, a breathless gasp leaving her lips. Blood blossomed from the wound as she tried to crawl, to reach for something, anything. But the second shot came, quick and without remorse. The balloons, still floating in the air, trembled with the shock of the blasts, their bright colors casting eerie shadows across the room. Alana's birthday party had become a battlefield. Her body lay motionless on the floor, and the once vibrant room was stained with the deep red of her life. The cake, untouched, had become a symbol of everything that had been taken away in an instant. The officers stood over her, unmoving. Their job was done. Outside, the sirens wailed, the flashing lights still illuminating the house, but it wasn't for the party anymore. It was for the crime scene. Marcus arrived just minutes later. The house was swarming with officers, all buzzing with orders, but none of them seemed to care about the man who just pulled into the driveway, who had no idea what waited for him inside. His phone had buzzed with a call from Claire, but the call dropped before he could hear her words. When he opened the door, the world stopped. The living room looked like a war zone. Alana, his baby girl, lay lifeless on the floor. Her dress, her birthday dress, was soaked in blood. Her fingers still clutched the phone she had been holding, the same phone that had led to her death. The birthday balloons floated overhead, a haunting reminder of the life that had been snatched away so violently, so unfairly. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. His fingers brushed her cheek, but there was no warmth, no life, only cold, the kind that went straight through his heart. His chest constricted. He didn't even hear the police officer who approached him, the words that followed. It felt like the whole world had fallen apart, leaving him alone in the rubble. It was a mistake, the officer said. We were looking for a suspect. Wrong house, wrong person. We'll handle it. Wrong house, wrong person. His mind couldn't process it. A mistake. A mistake had taken his daughter from him. A mistake had shattered everything he loved, and they were calling it nothing more than an error in their system. He reached for his phone, calling Claire, but his fingers trembled so much he could barely hold it. The news spread quickly, as these things always did. Alana Hayes, an innocent girl murdered by the police. A mistake. A mistake. That was the headline that ran across the news outlets. The city rallied, but nothing changed. The officers were not held accountable. No charges. No investigation. No justice. The system did what it always did. It protected its own. The case was closed before it had even begun. Marcus sat in silence that night, staring at the empty room. His daughter's things still scattered around the house, untouched. The scent of her birthday cake lingered in the air. She was gone, and all they left him with was a hollow, aching void and the truth that would haunt him forever. It wasn't just a mistake. It was murder, and Marcus was going to make them pay. The funeral was a blur of black suits, somber faces, and hollow words. Marcus stood at the front, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles white. Claire was beside him, her face a mask of silent grief, her eyes swollen from crying, but it was Marcus who felt like he was drowning in a sea of grief, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on his chest, making it impossible to breathe. The priest's voice echoed in the background, muttering words about eternal peace and divine justice. But Marcus didn't hear any of it. His mind was elsewhere, lost in the image of his daughter lying lifeless on the floor, her blood staining the birthday cake she never got to eat. That was the picture that played on a loop in his head, over and over again, every waking moment. He could still hear the sound of the gunshot, the scream that had pierced his soul, the crowd, the mourners. None of it mattered. He wanted to scream, to tear the world apart with his bare hands. How could they let this happen? How could they take his little girl away, and then pretend like it was a mistake? There was no justice in that, no peace. When it came time for Marcus to speak, he couldn't. His throat was tight, his voice lost in the sea of his emotions. He stood there, staring at the open casket, his body trembling with the force of his rage and grief. The words wouldn't come, not when he needed them the most, not when his heart was shattered beyond repair, and so, he said nothing. The eulogy was given by someone else, a stranger who didn't know his daughter. They spoke of her dreams and her kindness, of how bright she had been, but Marcus didn't care about any of that. It was just words, empty words. The burial was the same. The finality of the dirt hitting the casket, burying his daughter for good, was the moment when something inside Marcus finally cracked. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Instead, he stood there, numb, staring at the grave, watching as it disappeared beneath the earth, like she had never existed. Days passed, then weeks. The world moved on. The media had its moment, the protests died down, and people forgot. But Marcus couldn't forget. He drank. It was the only thing that dulled the pain, that took him away from the constant images in his head, the images of her final moments. He lost himself in alcohol, in solitude, in the silence of his home that now felt so cold. His walls, once decorated with pictures of Alana, her smiling face, her proud graduation photo, were now covered in darkness. The house was empty, her presence gone, and it felt like a tomb. But then the police showed up again. They came to his house, but not with answers. No, they came with warnings. Mr. Hayes, we advise you to stay away from this matter. It's been settled. You need to let it go. It was the same message every time. The officers, now behind desks instead of in the field, tried to intimidate him, to silence him. It was a mistake. They were just doing their job. There's nothing more to discuss. They handed him a report, brushed him off like a nuisance. There was no body cam footage from the raid, no dash cam footage, no evidence of any kind, just their word against his, and that, apparently, was enough. The case was closed. The police officers involved were free to walk. They were never held accountable. They were never punished. And Marcus couldn't stop the rage that boiled up inside him. His mind spun in circles, flashes of his years as an FBI agent flooding his consciousness. He had spent decades chasing criminals, profiling murderers, infiltrating underground operations. But nothing had prepared him for this. He had dealt with the darkest parts of the human soul, seen things that would break the average person, but nothing compared to the hollow pit that had opened inside him after Alana's death. He couldn't escape the memories. The nightmares were worse, PTSD flashbacks. He saw her face, the last look she gave him before they took her, the fear in her eyes, the pleading for mercy, and he couldn't help her. He hadn't been there. I failed her, he thought, over and over. His heart twisted with guilt. He could have stopped it. He should have been there. The weight of it all pressed down on him, and the drinking didn't help anymore. It only made him feel numb, detached, as though he were watching someone else live his life. He locked himself in his home, kept everyone away. He didn't speak to Claire much. She was as broken as he was, and neither of them knew how to fix the shattered pieces of their lives. But then, one night as he was rifling through old boxes in the attic, searching for something, anything to make sense of the chaos, he found it. Her journal, Alana's journal. He sat down in the dusty corner, opening the worn leather cover. The pages were filled with her handwriting, knit precise. The writing of a young woman who was passionate, who cared about the world. He could hear her voice in the words as he read her thoughts, her dreams. And then he reached the final entry. I want to change the world. Those words hit him like a punch to the gut. She had wanted to change the world. She had the power to do it. But now she was gone, taken by the system she had wanted to fight against. The injustice, the brokenness had taken everything from him. He slammed the journal shut. His hand shook with the fury building inside him. And then it hit him. A decision, a choice. If the system wouldn't punish them, he would. The thought burned in his mind. The rage surged again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just about grief anymore. It wasn't just about what they had taken from him. It was about justice. It was about the world Alana had wanted to change. A world that had failed her. Marcus stood up, wiping his face with his hands. He didn't know how to stop this. Didn't know how to take back what had been lost. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not without paying the price. He wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for her. Fighting for the justice she deserved. If the system won't punish them, I will. And in that moment, Marcus Hayes, the FBI agent who had sworn to uphold the law, became the very thing he had spent his career hunting. A man with nothing left to lose. A man bent on revenge. And he was ready to make the world pay. The night had been a nightmare for Marcus, but for the 3 men who had killed Alana, it was just another night on the job. The raid was over, the shots fired, the mess cleaned up. They'd gone through the motions, watched the girl die, called it a mistake, and then returned to their normal lives. They didn't talk about it much. No remorse, no guilt. It was all part of the job, and that's how they justified it. In their minds, they were the good guys. They were the ones keeping the peace, putting away the criminals. Alana's death, just another statistic, just another accident. It wasn't their fault. Cop number 1, Jimmy Dawson, the hot-headed rookie. Jimmy Dawson had always wanted to be a cop. He grew up in a tough neighborhood, surrounded by crime, and saw the police as the solution to the chaos. He idolized them, watched them patrol the streets, and wanted to be just like them. So, when he got his badge, he wore it like armor. It made him feel powerful, made him feel like he could control the world that had once been out of his reach. But Dawson wasn't cut out for the job. His temper was too quick, his patience too short. He was prone to violence, especially when he felt disrespected. And it was no secret that he'd been involved in several incidents of racial profiling. He didn't care much for the rules either, brushing off complaints with a cocky grin and a shrug. He thought he was invincible and touchable even. His colleagues, including the seasoned veterans in the department, didn't mind his outbursts. They laughed about it, even encouraged him to show the punks who's boss. He had a lot of pride, but not a lot of self-awareness. At home, Jimmy lived alone in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of town. His mother had died when he was young, and his father was never around. He buried himself in his work, often coming home late and drinking alone, staring at the walls that never seemed to hold any answers. He kept his emotions hidden, afraid to confront the anger and frustration that lived in him like a beast waiting to break free. The raid that killed Alana, it was supposed to be routine. He barely thought twice about it. She was just another obstacle. He had seen enough suspects run from the law, enough black faces that didn't act right in his eyes. But the real terror was that he didn't even realize what he'd done wrong. In his mind, she wasn't a person. She was just another thing in his way. Cop number 2, Marcus Mac Wallace. The veteran Marcus Mac Wallace had been on the force for nearly 20 years, and everyone knew him as one of the best. He had been decorated multiple times for his service, praised for his ability to take down suspects without hesitation, without mercy. His reputation in the department was sterling. He was the type of cop you called when you needed results fast and efficient, but Mac's success was built on a foundation of brutality. He had always been a man of force, often using excessive tactics to get the job done. He wasn't afraid to break a few rules to maintain order, and it didn't matter to him whether it was morally right or wrong. He believed the end justified the means. That was his philosophy, and it had served him well until now. Mac had a wife, Laura, and 2 kids. But the distance between him and his family was widening. Laura didn't understand why he worked so much, didn't understand why he came home with a blank stare in his eyes every night. She complained about him spending too much time at work, but Mac never listened. The truth was, he didn't know how to let go. He couldn't stop, His whole life had become about maintaining control, even at home, even when he was with his kids. He was a soldier in a war he didn't know how to end. The raid that killed Alana was a textbook operation for Mac. He didn't hesitate to take down a suspect, didn't hesitate to pull the trigger when the situation called for it. It was business. But when he learned that Alana was the victim, he didn't feel much. He never felt much anymore. His work was a shield, a way to distance himself from the world he was slowly destroying. Mac knew the system would protect him. He had done enough favors, made enough connections, and burned enough bridges to know that internal affairs wouldn't touch him. No one would ask questions. He had been through enough raids to know how to handle himself. Cop number 3, Derek Reed. The narcotics unit officer Derek Reed was different. He wasn't the hot-headed rookie, nor the decorated veteran. He was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, who always seemed to be watching. Derek had been a narcotics officer for over a decade, and though he wasn't as flashy as Mac or Dawson, he was feared. He had a reputation in the department for getting results no questions asked. But Derek's methods went beyond simply enforcing the law. He had a dark secret that no one knew about. He had been planting drugs on suspects for years. He wasn't doing it for the thrill of the power. No, it was about control. He was the one who decided who was guilty and who wasn't. His carefully crafted schemes kept him in the department's good graces, and he could always get away with it. At home, Derek was a family man. His wife, Kim, had no idea about his criminal activities. She thought he was just doing his job, bringing home the paycheck. Derek loved her, loved his kids, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was always 2 steps away from being exposed. The guilt gnawed at him, but he buried it beneath layers of denial. After all, he was helping put away the bad guys, wasn't he? When it came to the raid, Derek wasn't as involved as the others, but he played his part. He had seen too many people like Alana, people who got in the way of his work. They didn't matter that the 3 of them, Dawson, Mac and Reed, had a bond, an unspoken agreement that they were in this together. They were a brotherhood, bound by a shared purpose, to protect each other at all costs. They knew how to cover each other's tracks, how to make sure nothing ever stuck. And when the raid went wrong, when Alana died, they didn't worry. Internal affairs would clear them. They always did. They met up after the raid, sitting in a dimly lit bar far from the reach of any prying eyes. Their laughter echoed, a sound that should have been filled with guilt, but was instead filled with relief. They weren't sorry. Not for Alana, not for the wrong house, not for anything. She shouldn't have been in the way, Dawson said, his voice casual. It was just another day. Who cares? Mac grinned, the ice in his glass clinking as he took a long sip. Exactly. She got caught in the crossfire. Happens all the time. Derek didn't say much. He just stared into his drink, but the guilt still lingered in his chest. He had never planted drugs on someone so innocent before, but he wasn't about to say that. The Brotherhood had to stay strong. There was no room for weakness. They clinked their glasses together, toasting to their silence, to the shield of protection that would keep them safe from the truth. Blue silence, they called it, and it would protect them, always. But somewhere, deep down, Marcus Hayes was coming for them, and they didn't even see it coming. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. There was no sound of Alana's laughter echoing from the halls, no music playing softly from her room. Marcus stood in the middle of it, staring into the emptiness, the stillness, his fingers clenched around the journal that had sealed his decision. It wasn't just grief anymore. It wasn't just anger. It was something more primal, more dangerous. Something that had been buried deep within him for years, buried beneath the badge, beneath the years of training, beneath the man who had sworn to protect and serve. Now, that man was gone, and the hunter had emerged as he walked into the garage. His eyes scanned the rows of boxes and shelves, the remnants of a lifelong left behind. The familiar smell of gun oil and metal hung in the air, a scent that had once comforted him when he was still on the force. But now, it was nothing but a reminder of what he had lost. The FBI had trained him well. He had been a profiler, an expert in understanding people, reading them, predicting their actions. He knew how criminals thought, how they moved, how they hid. He had spent years in the shadows, studying their patterns, tracking their every move. It had been a life of intense focus, of control. Now, he was about to use all of it for a very different purpose. He moved quickly, efficiently, pulling out his old gear. The rifle, the sidearm, the box of ammunition. He didn't hesitate. He was ready. He started with the basics, familiarizing himself with his weapons. The gun felt heavy in his hand, but it was a comfort. He knew it. He knew how to use it, how to put a target down with deadly precision. But that wasn't enough. Not this time. He needed to think like the killers he was about to hunt. He needed to understand them completely. He started reviewing his old case files, boxes of them, focusing on the types of criminals he had profiled during his time with the FBI. He broke down every case, every criminal's psychological profile, learning their triggers, their weaknesses, and slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Jimmy Dawson, hot-headed, impulsive. He had a history of racial profiling and a deep-seated anger toward those he saw as less than. His trigger was simple: disrespect. He would react without thinking, and that made him dangerous, but also predictable. Marcus smiled grimly as he jotted down the details. Dawson wasn't the smartest. He was reckless, driven by his emotions. That would be his downfall. Next, Mac Wallace, the seasoned veteran, the one who had spent his career perfecting the art of control. Mac was cold, calculating, and had a history of excessive force. He didn't hesitate to break the rules if it meant getting the job done. He had a familiar wife, 2 kids, and a reputation to maintain, but beneath that polished exterior was a man who feared losing control. He feared weakness. The final one, Derek Reed, the narcotics officer, quiet, methodical, and calculating. Derek had a deep dark secret that kept him in the shadows. His history with planting evidence was well hidden, and he was good at covering his tracks. But there was one thing Derek couldn't escape: his guilt. He was living a lie, and that guilt ate away at him. Slowly, it would catch up with him. Marcus knew that. With the information in hand, Marcus began his surveillance. He didn't waste time. He knew where they lived, where they worked, where they drank. He began to move like a shadow, slipping in and out of their lives without them ever knowing. Dawson was the easiest to track. The rookie was reckless. He spent his nights at the local bar, talking loud, bragging about his latest busts. He was arrogant, constantly looking for validation. Marcus watched him from a distance, waiting for the right moment. Mac Wallace was more difficult. He was a family man, always home by dinner time, always with his wife and kids. But Marcus knew how to get to him. He watched the house, followed Mac to the gym, to the stores. He knew Mac's routine, his vulnerabilities. Mac didn't fear much. He had spent too many years in the game to be afraid of anything. But Marcus had seen his type before, and he knew that Mac was hiding something deeper than his cold exterior. Derek Reed was the hardest to track. He was meticulous, almost paranoid, but Marcus had been trained to find even the smallest crack in a man's armor. He started following Derek on his shifts, watching him leave the station late at night, always alone. He was a man burdened by his own secrets, and those secrets were starting to weigh him down. Marcus could feel it. It didn't take long before Marcus had a full picture of who they were. The men who had taken everything from him, the men who had ruined his daughter's life, and in turn, his own. But even as he gathered the intel, a nagging doubt gnawed at him. He hadn't forgotten the look in Alana's eyes, the hope, the dream she had of changing the world, of making it a better place. She didn't want this. She wouldn't have wanted her father to become a killer, to take justice into his own hands. The thought of her kept him awake at night. Her journal, the words she had written: "I want to change the world." She had wanted to fight for justice, not blood. She had believed in the system. She had believed that things could be made right through the law, through the courts, through change. And here Marcus was, preparing to break every law he had ever sworn to uphold. He closed his eyes, letting her face flash in his mind, and in that moment, he saw her again, alive, laughing, dreaming. This isn't who she would have wanted me to become, but the anger was too much. The injustice, the unfairness of it all. The system had failed her, and Marcus couldn't stand by and let them get away with it. Not when he had the power to make them pay. The choice was clear. Justice through the system was a lie. The only way to make them understand what they had done was through vengeance. It was the rookie, the one who had pulled the trigger without hesitation, that Marcus chose to deal with first. He had to make them understand that there would be consequences for their actions. No one would be safe. Not until they paid for what they had done. Dawson had been out drinking, as usual, bragging about his latest exploits. Marcus knew the bar he frequented, knew the exact time he would be there. It wasn't a hard target. Dawson was too arrogant to notice the man who had been watching him from the corner booth, the man who had been there for weeks, taking note of every detail. Marcus waited until Dawson was drunk, stumbling out of the bar, laughing with his friends. The world around him was blurry, his judgment impaired by the alcohol. He never saw Marcus approach. With one swift motion, Marcus moved in quiet, quick, and efficient. Dawson's world went dark before he had a chance to scream. The first one was down, standing over Dawson's body. Marcus stared down at the young man, so full of anger, so full of pride. He had been a fool, just like Marcus had been years ago, thinking he could change the world with force, with power. They didn't hesitate. Marcus muttered to himself, "Neither will I. This was just the beginning. The system wouldn't punish them, but Marcus would." He turned, walking away into the night. The hunt had only just begun. The first one was down. Jimmy Dawson's body lay lifeless in the back alley, hidden beneath a pile of discarded trash. The rookie cop's arrogance had been his undoing. It had been too easy. But even as Marcus wiped the blood from his hands, the satisfaction of revenge wasn't there. The rage, the fury, it had not been quelled. It was a fire that burned only brighter now, fed by the taste of justice, as flawed as it was. But as he moved to disappear into the shadows, to erase himself once more, the world around him began to change. The first kill, the first strike against the men who had murdered his daughter, had sparked something much larger than he anticipated. By the time the news hit, Marcus was already far from the scene. He had planned his exit, his every move carefully orchestrated, as always, but the system had already begun to turn his vengeance into something else entirely, something it could control. The headlines rolled in early the next morning. Police officer found dead in suspected gang-related incident. Gang violence, the media claimed. The body had been found in an alley, the area known for gang activity. The police quickly spun a narrative, making it sound like a turf war gone wrong. A random hit in a part of town where danger was always lurking. There was no mention of Dawson's uniform, no mention of the badge, the raid. There was no mention of Marcus's anger, his revenge. It was simply brushed under the rug, buried beneath layers of media spin. But to Marcus, it felt like a slap in the face. They had done it again. The system, the very one that had failed his daughter, had buried the truth, shoved it into the shadows, and forced the world to look away. It was no different from the day Alana died, the police declaring it a mistaken identity and then walking free. The media took the bait. The streets were quiet. The police, the ones who had done the killing, were still walking free. The story was already starting to fade from the news cycle. Marcus didn't know it then, but the system was about to come for him in ways he had never expected. Days passed, and Marcus fell deeper into his obsession. His every move was calculated, his every decision precise. The next target had already been chosen, and his name was Marcus Wallace, the veteran cop, the one who had led the raid, the one who had been there in the room when Alana died. But as he prepared for the next step in his hunt, something he hadn't planned for was already in motion. The FBI was called in. His former colleagues, people he had worked alongside for years, men and women who had once trusted him with the most delicate of investigations, people who had seen him at his best. Now they were looking for him. They had a case to crack, and they weren't going to let the truth stay hidden for long. His old team, the ones who had once called him a friend, were now tracking him like prey. But this was not just about the murder of an officer. It was about something bigger. It was about power. It was about protecting their own. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't care that Marcus's daughter was dead. They cared about maintaining the integrity of the system that had allowed them to thrive, and they had made him the enemy. Marcus sat in his dimly lit kitchen late one night, his hands wrapped tightly around a glass of whiskey, his thoughts swirling. The hunt was never far from his mind. Neither was the image of Dawson's body, cold and lifeless in that alley. It had been too easy, but he knew the next one would be different. Mac Wallace would be more careful. He would be expecting him. The phone rang. His heart skipped a beat. It was a number he hadn't seen in years, a name he thought he'd left behind. "Marcus," the voice on the other end said. "I know what you're doing." It was Jack Riley, his old partner from the bureau. Riley had been there for Marcus's darkest days, the days when they had both chased the criminals who now seemed so much closer. But now, Riley's voice was filled with something different, something Marcus couldn't quite place. "Don't do this," Riley said, his voice tight with concern. "I've seen your name pop up on the case files, and I'm warning you, if you're really the one behind these deaths, you need to stop. They'll come for you next." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He let the words sink in, the reality of what Riley was saying. They were coming for him. He had known it deep down, but hearing it from Riley, hearing the fear in his voice, made the truth feel so much closer. "They'll come for you," Riley repeated, "and they won't stop until they have you. If you think this is about justice, you're wrong. It's about something else, something bigger than you. Don't throw your life away, Marcus. I'm telling you this as a friend." Marcus's hand shook slightly as he set the glass down, his gaze locked on the phone. The old connection between them, the shared understanding, made him question his own path. But the anger, the need for vengeance, It was too strong. Alana is dead because I followed the rules, Marcus said, his voice cold and distant. The rules don't work. The system doesn't work. And it never will. There was silence on the other end of the line. Riley's voice softened, a hint of sadness in it. I wish you could see it differently. Marcus hung up before he could hear anything else. The next night, as the rain pelted the windows, Marcus received another call. This one wasn't from the bureau, but from the one person who knew him better than anyone, Claire, his ex-wife. He hadn't heard from her in months, and the sound of her voice caught him off guard. Marcus, please, she begged, her voice breaking through the static of the phone line. I know you're angry. I know what they did. But this isn't the way. You have to stop. Alana wouldn't want this. The words were soft but firm, filled with a kind of tenderness only a mother could express. Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of her plea sitting heavily in his chest. He had never wanted to hurt Claire. She had always been there, even when their marriage fell apart, when their daughter was growing up too fast. She had been the one who kept the family grounded. But now, she was asking him to turn away from what he had decided was the only way to bring justice. Alana is dead because I followed the rules, Marcus said again, his voice almost a whisper. She's dead because of their mistakes, because of their lies. You know that, Claire. But this won't bring her back, Claire whispered, a tear in her voice. It won't. Please, Marcus, don't do this. It will destroy you. But Marcus's mind was already made up. He didn't want to be destroyed. He didn't care if he was. He would burn everything down if it meant they would finally pay. The more Marcus moved through the shadows, the more the system began to close in on him. He had become the enemy now, the one they would hunt down, the one they would destroy. They weren't just going after the killer of a cop anymore. They were going after Marcus Hayes, the former FBI agent who had broken the rules, who had dared to take justice into his own hands. The police increased their presence in black neighborhoods, tightening the noose. Patrol cars rolled through the streets, sirens wailing in the distance. The echo of their presence a reminder that Marcus's fight was becoming something bigger than himself. As the investigation continued, the collateral damage grew. The streets became a battleground, the community held in a vice grip, caught between a system that had failed them and the rise of a man who was willing to burn it all down for his daughter. Everywhere Marcus looked, he saw reminders of what he had lost. He could no longer separate his fight for vengeance from the destruction it was causing. Innocent people were getting caught in the crossfire, and yet, the hunger for revenge couldn't be quenched. Not yet, not until every one of them paid. The tension built. The system was moving against him, and there was no turning back now. The hunt had gone on for weeks, and now there was only one left. The last one, the one who had been the mastermind behind the raid, the one who had stood over Alana's body with no remorse. It had always been Marcus's plan to get to him last. The veteran, the one who thought he was untouchable. Mac Wallace. Mac was a different breed, cold, calculating, and unshakable. He had survived decades in the force by following one simple rule: never show fear. He wasn't like Dawson, who had been impulsive and reckless, or Red, who had hidden in the shadows, consumed by guilt. No, Mac had always been in control. He knew how to cover his tracks, how to play the game, how to make sure he never left a trail behind him. He had no weaknesses, and he had no fears, until now. But Marcus had learned everything about him: the places Mac went, the habits he couldn't break, the things he was afraid of. It hadn't been hard to track him down, not when you knew exactly how a man like Mac thought. And Marcus had been studying him, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was just after dawn when the chase began. Marcus had been tailing Mac for hours, watching him drive down narrow back roads, through the small towns where no one knew the truth. It was a quiet part of the world, a place where people still thought the law would protect them, where the police were seen as heroes, not as the men who killed innocents and got away with it. Mac had been trying to lose him. He could feel the weight of the eyes on him, the sense that something was wrong, that someone was watching. But he was too good at this, too experienced. He knew how to lose a tail. But Marcus had one advantage. He was more desperate. He didn't need to be smart or stealthy. He just needed to get close enough. He was willing to do whatever it took. And so he followed, the distance between them closing with each turn, each mile. He was going to end this today. He was going to make them pay for what they did to Alana. They had driven out of the small town and into a forested area now. The trees thick around them, casting long shadows across the dirt roads. The sounds of the engine were muffled by the dense air, and Marcus had lost sight of him for a few moments. But he knew where Mac was headed. They had been here before, this quiet stretch of woods. It was a place where the law could hide its sins, where the rules didn't matter. Mac pulled off the road, parking just beyond a cluster of trees. thinking he had evaded his pursuer. But he didn't know Marcus like Marcus knew him. He didn't know that Marcus had already anticipated this move. Marcus parked a few yards away, silent, still. He got out of the car, his hands steady as he loaded his gun. This would be the final confrontation, the last battle in a war that had started the day his daughter was killed, and now, the only thing left was to end it. It wasn't long before Marcus heard the sound of footsteps, a crunching of leaves, the unmistakable sound of someone else approaching, someone who had made the same decision as he had. The trees were thick, but Marcus's training had taught him how to move without making a sound. He moved forward cautiously, the shadows of the trees giving him cover. Then, out of the darkness, Mac Wallace appeared, walking slowly, as if he knew he was being followed. His eyes scanned the woods, alert but not afraid. He had been waiting for this, too. He had known Marcus would come for him, and he had prepared himself. "You don't have to do this, Marcus." Mac's voice cut through the air. He didn't sound scared, just resigned, like he was talking to an old friend. "I didn't kill your daughter. You know that, right? This is bigger than you, than her. The system is the way it is because it works. People like you, people like us, we do the dirty work, and we get the job done. There's no room for sentiment, no room for mercy." Marcus stepped from the shadows, his gun drawn, aimed directly at Mac's chest. "You killed my daughter," he said, his voice quiet but filled with rage. "You took everything from me." Mac didn't flinch. "You think you're the first person to lose someone. You think your pain is special. This is just the way things are. You're just another angry black man looking for someone to blame. And now, here you are, playing the part, just like all the others." The words were sharp, meant to cut deep. Mac was trying to provoke him, trying to break him down, to make him doubt himself. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He had already made up his mind. "Stop talking," Marcus said, his voice steady. "You don't get to make excuses anymore." Mac smirked, his hand moving subtly toward his gun. The tension was thick in the air, the unspoken threat of violence looming between them. In that moment, it was more than just a fight between two men. It was a fight between worlds, between a broken system and a man who had been pushed past his breaking point. It was a fight between the law and the truth, and it was a fight Marcus couldn't lose. Without warning, Mac lunged for his gun, but Marcus was faster. He fired a shot, grazing Mac's shoulder, the bullet embedding itself into a tree nearby. Mac screamed in pain but kept coming, a wild fury in his eyes. The two men collided, both of them fighting with everything they had. Marcus had the advantage of training, but Mac had the advantage of years in the field. Years of knowing how to fight dirty, how to use every trick in the book. The struggle was intense, raw, and violent. The gun was forgotten for a moment, discarded to the side as they grappled in the dirt, each trying to gain the upper hand. Mac's hands were like steel, gripping Marcus's throat, his knees pressing into Marcus's chest, trying to suffocate him. But Marcus wasn't done. He broke free with a strength he didn't know he had, slamming Mac's head into the ground with a sickening crack. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for control, for power. The anger inside Marcus was a living thing now, and he was ready to let it consume him completely. They both staggered to their feet, each gasping for breath, their bodies covered in blood, dirt, and sweat. Mac was the first to reach for his gun, but Marcus was faster. He grabbed it, twisting it out of Mac's hand, pinning it to the ground with a sickening force. Marcus stared down at him, his breathing heavy, his chest rising and falling with the exertion. Mac's face was twisted in pain, his eyes wide with fear. "You killed my daughter," Marcus repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now you're going to pay." As Marcus looked down at Mac, his finger hovering over the trigger, something caught him. A flash of Alana's face, a memory, clear and sharp. He saw her smile, her bright eyes full of hope, full of love. He saw her in that dress, the one she had worn on her birthday, the one that had been soaked in her blood. The gun felt heavier now, as though it had suddenly become something more than just a tool of vengeance. It felt like a weight, a burden. Alana wouldn't have wanted this. She wouldn't have wanted her father to become the monster that he had spent his entire life hunting. Mac's taunts rang in his ears, just another angry black man. The words hit him like a slap. Was that all he was? Was that all he would ever be? He stared at Mac's trembling form, and for a moment it wasn't just the cop who was lying on the ground, it was him. His finger tightened around the trigger. The cold steel pressed into his palm, but something stopped him. Something deeper than the rage, deeper than the need for revenge. Stopped him. He thought of Alana again, her dreams, her hopes, her belief that things could be better. He had promised her justice, but was this the justice she would have wanted? In the end, Marcus hesitated. The sound of the gunshot never came. Instead, Marcus let the gun drop to the ground, his body collapsing beside it, his hands shaking as he looked at the man who had caused all of this. He wasn't the man who had raised his daughter to be strong. He wasn't the man who had once stood tall in the face of danger. He was broken, and so was the world he had tried to change. He stood up slowly, his heart heavy with the burden of his choices. And as Mac Wallace lay there, broken but alive, Marcus walked away. The fight for justice wasn't over. But the man who had been consumed by vengeance was. The system would never change. But neither would he. The rain had been falling for hours, the steady rhythm against the windows only amplifying the stillness in the small apartment where Marcus Hayes sat. His hands, once steady and sure, trembled as he looked down at the piece of paper in front of him. It was a letter, another letter to his daughter. The words came slowly, painfully, each one an admission of the man he had become, a man he had never meant to be. He had failed her. He had promised justice for Alana, but the price had been far greater than he ever imagined. Outside, the world had changed. Protests had erupted across the country, a wave of anger and demand for justice flooding the streets. People carried signs with Alana's name, chanting her memory in every city, in every neighborhood. Her face, once a quiet smile and a family photo, had become a symbol. She was the spark that lit a fire that would burn through the broken system Marcus had tried to fight. But now, Marcus was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. The news broke late one night. Marcus Hayes, former FBI agent vigilante, had been captured. The media had wasted no time labeling him a criminal, a murderer, a man driven by vengeance. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted, their voices full of outrage, and the world saw him as nothing more than a man who had taken the law into his own hands. They painted him as a monster, a rogue agent who couldn't control his anger. But that wasn't the whole truth. In the quiet, hidden corners of the city, some began to see him as something else, a hero, perhaps, or at the very least, a man who had done what the system refused to do. But Marcus wasn't there to hear it. The moment the authorities found him, they made sure to keep him out of sight. He was either arrested or, depending on who you asked, he simply disappeared into the night. Some said he was locked away in a prison cell, a forgotten name in the system's files. Others whispered that he had run, hidden himself away in some shadowed place, his grief and rage still a part of him, never truly letting go. Alana's name echoed in every corner of the world now. Her face, once just a daughter's smile, was now plastered on every protest banner, every social media post. The justice that had been denied to her in life was now demanded in death. Her story had spread beyond the confines of their town, beyond the confines of what had happened that night. She had become more than a victim. She had become a symbol. The calls for justice grew louder, the chants swelling as more and more people joined the cause. Marcus's violent path had only ignited the fire of the movement. His daughter, her memory, her death, had given the world a reason to rise up against the system that had killed her. People wanted answers, they wanted accountability, and though they had failed her in life, Alana's death had brought a truth to the surface that no one could ignore. The system was broken, and it had taken the life of an innocent girl to show it. The pressure from the public grew too great to ignore. Despite the system's best efforts to bury Marcus's actions, despite the narrative they had crafted around his supposed madness, the truth couldn't stay hidden for long. Internal Affairs was forced to reopen the case. The officers involved in the men who had killed Alana could no longer hide behind the veil of silence. They were dragged into the light, their pasts and their actions scrutinized. Investigations into the corruption, the cover-ups, the lies, everything that had been brushed aside came back to haunt them. But it wasn't enough. The damage was done. The system had failed. But it was too late for the truth to fix what had already been lost. Alana's case had become a symbol, but the justice she deserved had not yet come. It was only fitting that a mural would be painted in her honor. Her image, her smile, was now immortalized on a wall near the courthouse. The colorful strokes of paint captured her youth, her hope, her dreams, everything she could have been had her life not been taken so violently. The mural stood tall in the city, a beacon of what had been lost, and every day, people stopped to pay their respects, leaving flowers, candles, and messages of love. But it was also a reminder Alana's death had sparked something that couldn't be stopped. But for Marcus, the mural was another wound, a constant reminder of the daughter he had failed to protect, a reminder of how far he had fallen, how much he had sacrificed. It was in the small hours of the morning, alone in his apartment, that Marcus finally wrote the last letter to Alana. Marcus sat by the window, the cold air blowing in as he took the pen to paper for the last time. The words were hard to form, each letter a stab into the heart of his grief. He had written to her every night since he had started his hunt letters, filled with everything he couldn't say to her when she was alive, everything he couldn't change. His hands shook as he wrote, but the words were clear. They always were when it came to her. I became what I hated. I became the very thing I swore I would never become. The ink smeared slightly as he wiped away the tear that had fallen onto the page. But I gave you justice, Alana, in my own way. I made them pay for what they did to you. Marcus paused, staring at the words on the page. A small sob escaped him, one he couldn't hold back anymore. The fight had cost him everything, his family, his honor, his soul. And for what? I couldn't save you, but I tried. I couldn't stop the monsters who took you, but I made them feel the weight of your loss. I gave you justice, but at what cost? He looked at the page once more, reading over his words. His heart was heavy with the truth of them. He had fought, yes, but he had lost more than he had gained. Justice was elusive, slipping through his fingers, just like his daughter had. I don't know if it was worth it, Alana. I don't know if I've done the right thing, but you're still here, in my heart, in every mural that bears your face, and in every chant that calls for your justice. He set the pen down, unable to write any more. The weight of the last few months crushed him, his body trembling under the gravity of everything he had done. In the end, Marcus didn't know what he had achieved. He didn't know if his actions had changed anything. He didn't know if his daughter would have wanted him to become the very monster he had spent his life hunting. But in his heart, he knew one thing. He had done something, however imperfect, to avenge her. The final letter was sealed, the words captured in ink forever. He folded the letter, as he had done so many times before, and placed it on the table next to her picture. He didn't know if he would be here when it was read. Maybe it would be his last dot in the distance. The city hummed with life protests still in the streets, the mural still standing tall. The fight wasn't over. The system hadn't changed. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope. As he looked at the wall of the small apartment, the picture of Alana staring back at him, he whispered the last words he would say to her. I didn't get justice, but I stopped the monsters, and for the first time in months, Marcus Hayes allowed himself to close his eyes, to rest, knowing that the battle, at least for now, was over.